Maps. The premier attraction where we, as players, immerse ourselves within the fictional world to escape our mundane existences. The Battlefield franchise has had many a fantastic map over the years, and quite a few so bad, I'd rather than play again.
What did he say?
Map balance, visual fidelity, feel, and relevance to the subject matter can make or break a video game product. In this regard, I'm of the opinion Battlefield 1 is a high point in the franchise, with the majority of the maps being both enjoyable and incredible experiences. To this end, today, we are going to rank all 29 of Battlefield 1's maps from worst to best based on how they play in 2022. When it comes to ranking these maps, there were a couple of things that I wanted to keep in mind. Firstly, my rankings were focused mostly on how they played from a gameplay perspective, with only minor consideration of their relevance from a historical standpoint. Second, while balance is important, a map must be able to be as balanced as it is fun, as at the end of the day, this is a video game we are talking about. Finally, as map experience differs from player to player, these rankings are purely my own opinion, so feel free to let me know your lists in the comments below. Timestamps, as always, will be in the description below. Also, if you like this type of content and want to see more of it, make sure to like the video and subscribe with post notifications turned on. Now, this video is going to be a bit of a longer one, so without further ado, make sure you're comfortable and let's get right into it. Starting off with the worst, we've got Heligoland Bight. While I love the overall concept of the map, framing naval warfare against a monolith rising from the ocean, the map is very poorly designed, mostly due to devolving into a winding, single-laned experience with almost zero flanking routes, and what I believe to be poor infantry-to-vehicle interaction. Most matches simply devolve to running aimlessly back and forth while trying to avoid being blown up by the lucky few who manage to score a seat in the Behemoth or L-class destroyer. Glacier is almost the polar opposite of Heligoland Bight. The map has no lanes, extremely limited cover, and is mostly a flat surface, making it a sniper's paradise. If you can manage to run from point A to point B without being struck by 57mm rifle bolts, you've accomplished something. While Caporetto is my pick for the most gorgeous map in Battlefield 1, in terms of gameplay, it leaves a lot to be desired. Due to being limited by the Conquest Assault game mode, all rounds start with attackers attempting to push their way down a hill to A objective, all while under fire with extremely limited cover. Unfortunately, this lack of cover extends across the majority of the map, with control of the B flag basically deciding the result of most rounds, due to most routes out of the attacker's spawn being visible from the objective. Priest de Terreur's problems can be summarised in a single statement. I couldn't fucking see him. The visibility of Priest may just be the worst of any Battlefield map ever, which is incredibly disappointing as the overall balance in the design of the map isn't actually that bad. The best comparison is that of Army N at night. However, at night should not mean exposure values of 0. Most rounds operate in a cyclical format, with major clashes occurring around the C-flag courtyard. Overall, I believe Priest would be a good map, if they'd made it about 10 times brighter. Albion's greatest critique is its size. As BF1 operates on the basis of 32v32 matches, roughly half of the map's overall area is often wasted, with engagements only really occurring within the zone occupied by the B, C, D, and E objectives. However, control of the D and E objectives provides a massive advantage against the attacking Germans due to the mountainous elevations, causing map control to be incredibly difficult to sway away from the Russians' favour. If BF1 had received the 64v64 capabilities we see with Battlefield 2042, Albion may be a more well-rounded, interesting map. Monte Grappa should honestly just be renamed to either Ilya Muromets Simulator or Bristol instead of your pistol. Planes absolutely run the mountains of Italy, mostly due to the elevated and narrow nature of the major engagement routes between B and D objectives. This elevated nature also actively discourages the use of flanking routes below the mountain crest, as M1917 MG users have a plethora of rocks, trenches, and bushes to prone within that grant sightlines across the entirety of the valley below. Novell Nights is the second of the two night maps, and unfortunately is similar to Priest in regards to its visibility. Thankfully though, while Priest has its exposure set to 0, Novell sits at around a 15, with the trench sections being quite well lit overall. Most engagements occur within the triangulated B, D, and E zone, with control of the D flag typically dictating the offensive pressure. Overall, I enjoy Novell, but firmly believe the centre of the map needs better lighting, even if it does break the overall immersion of the nighttime environment. Zaretzine can be pretty fun, and actually plays quite well on operations. However, due to the centralised position and design of the B flag, rounds can very easily be won by strongly holding the cathedral with assaults, while guarding any external routes with tanks and scouts positioned behind the ample cover provided by the broken buildings. Lupko Pass is one of those maps that you forget is in the game until you play it, possibly due to it commonly being perceived as a less polished version of Albion. I, however, prefer Lupko to Albion, as I am much more preferential to the pass's position and spread of cover, as well as flanking routes which provide a much firmer balance between the infantry archetypes. However, it does still suffer from its size, with the outer objectives seeing almost 0 play on most rounds. If I had to describe Suez in one word, it would be unbalanced. Almost every game ends with one team steamrolling the other, with most matches being decided by who can drive the transport vehicles to sea the fastest. While its close quarters infantry focus can be fun, too many matches devolve into spawn trapping enemies who struggle to cross vast open spaces with no cover. While aesthetically speaking, Foul Fortress really sells the whole battle for oil on the peninsula theme, it kind of throws any kind of map balance out the window on the western side of the map. Operations games barely leave the first sector within a battalion, and conquest matches mostly devolve into getting sniped by whoever controls the elevated D objective or the fortress itself. If both teams manage to get a footing within the fortress, it can make for some very entertaining engagement and gameplay, if the British side can make it that far without being sniped or blown apart by planes. River Somme is fine, I guess. While the gas cannons can be cool, they aren't really that practical considering how easily A objective can be captured with tanks. The rest of the map is kind of The trench section can feel impractical at times, as the nature of their design does seem a bit over the top in sections. Meanwhile, around the windmill, the lack of cover makes it easy picking for snipers players. Honestly, the back of the map is probably its most interesting, as fighting amongst the obliterated buildings strikes a much more complete gameplay balance the majority of the time. As much as my Australian pride hates to bash the Gallipoli-inspired map, Cape Hells can really suck to play, particularly on Conquest Assault. It is simultaneously the hardest map to push and to defend based on the skill level of each team. If the attackers are smart, they will simply boat around to the back of the map and pincer the defenders. If the attackers are stupid, they will remain shore-locked, unable to press the defenders out of spawn. Due to the map restrictions placed by operations, I feel the map plays better in this style. Sinai Desert is big. But in all seriousness, I have some genuine critiques of Sinai. While its combat focus within the town area does strike an almost perfect balance between cover and engagement opportunity, why does the G objective exist? Why is F spaced so far out? Personally, if both G and F were removed and objective E was made the opening flag for the Ottomans, I think the map would flow better, as the British would have access to the control point of the mountaintop while the Ottomans get first dibs on the town. Volga River almost entirely revolves around control of the church that acts as the C objective in Conquest. Other than that, I can't say much else about it. In my opinion, it's about the most average of all the maps, and I'm fairly neutral on it. Nothing to complain about, nothing to praise too much. It's just a map. Framed against the Italian mountainside, Empire's Edge strikes a reasonably good balance between tanker, pilot, and infantry gameplay. While the map is still too large for its own good, the areas where combat is focused, particularly the hilltops of C and D objectives, play fairly well, with opportunities for clever use of BF1's limited movement system. However, the hilltop at the northern edge of the map is an incredibly powerful position, especially when occupied by tanks or artillery trucks, who have free reign to oppress the entire map with very limited resistance. I will be honest, I hate St. Quentin Scar, to the point I often leave games when the map comes up. The way the map is shaped, like a giant bowl with high ridges that actively encourage campers to be as impressive as possible, make the map incredibly frustrating on Conquest. On the other hand, St. Quentin completely sells the operations experience, and is still more balanced than the likes of Suez or Monte Grappa. Say what you will about St. Quentin, but personally, it's the scar on my mental state. Zeebrugge is my favourite of the Conquest Assault maps, and makes the most of what is a flawed game mode. The linear gameplay, free of tanks against the dark and cold backdrop of the Zeebrugge Mole, really sells the infantry experience. While the map can be difficult to push at times, most gunfights are controllable, with ample cover supplied to make the slow advance towards the beach. Soissons suffers from the same issues as St. Quentin Scar, just without the bowl-shaped design. Large sections of the map can be controlled from spawn with an M1917 MG, and the hillside is basically a giant dead zone, where death is inevitable 90% of the time. Everywhere else though, Soissons is the The town area is wonderfully designed, and is immediately recognisable by the creek that winds through its centre. The hilltop ruins and sprawling mansion provide great set pieces for varying engagements, and cover is rarely an issue. It's just unfortunate that half the map is almost unplayable. Fort de Vaux, Battlefield 1's meat grinder. The map where aggressiveness is king and shotguns are meta. What can I say that hasn't already been said? While it isn't as much of a fan favourite as Operation Locker and Metro from previous titles, it still serves to satisfy that little voice in the back of your head that just wants to commit several war crimes and blow shit up. While your life expectancy may be short, there's always room for some fun in the fort. Giant's Shadow, or the Blimp Map, is instantly recognisable by the blimp carcass that serves as its centre. This blimp also serves as the main battle area, with both the C and D flag being housed within the opposing ends of the carcass. In terms of conquest, these flags are designed to be split, with the D flag being closer to the German spawn, while the C flag resides closer to the British spawn. However, if the British are able to attain control of both of these flags, the German side can very easily find themselves trapped along the ridge that separates the E flag from the blimp. As such, this is the area where most engagements tend to occur, as the Germans try to regain control of their side of the blimp. While this can make for some incredible killing sprees, it does also mean players are often clumped together, allowing for easy Ilya Muromets multi-kills. I personally love Giant's Shadow, but can very easily understand why someone may rank it lower overall. Verdun Heights could honestly double as both the name of and first album cover of a metalcore band that I would become way too invested in. The ever-rising flames bathing the map in a sea of red and orange establishes that hell-on-earth landscape that BF1 was sorely missing prior to its introduction. While Verdun is mostly balanced in terms of gameplay, with most conflicts occurring along the charred hill crests and within the ruined church that serves as the C objective, the hills closest to the German spawn provide such unchallengeable lines of sight across the map. Talented long-range snipers can have an absolute field day. Additionally, the final sector in operations can be almost impossible to push if you fail to have an above-average team, due to the precipitous nature of the trenches you have to climb to reach the final capture zone. Otherwise, I love this map, and thoroughly enjoy what it has to offer. Amiens is the map Priest was designed to mimic, and for good reason. The city streets and squares of the French city, while simple from a navigational standpoint, are incredibly effective at distinguishing zones of interest for each class. Scout players are given long lanes to control hidden behind these scattered carcasses of buildings, while supports safeguard their aggressing assault and medic teammates from balconies that line the centralised train tracks that divide the map in two. The only major complaint I have with Army N is how incredibly powerful the light tank can be when parked at the edge of lanes, where its firepower and mobility can rule effectively uncontested. BF1's original chaotic infantry experience, Argonne Forest is one of those maps that is both beloved and hated depending on who you talk to. Set during the opening phase of the Meuse Argonne offensive, the dense foliage, winding corners, and routes bordered by rock faces produces one of the most close-quartered combats in the game. While conquest games tend to be governed by who can capture the C flag first, the widened ravine surrounding the bridged objective encompasses the majority of fights, with supports and scouts posted on opposing ridges providing covering fire for the aggressing assault and medic players. Alternatively, operations rounds tend to take a much more chaotic approach, with shotgun and SMG wielding assaults being heavily relied upon to breach each defensive line under harsh suppression from opposing encampments. Although skilled squads can run this map with greater ease than some other infantry maps, Argonne is an experience unto itself that deserves a top tier ranking. Set during the Allied counter-offensive of the Second Battle of the Marne, Rupture artistically demonstrates the duality of the Great War, with the French separated from German defences by rusted carcasses of French tanks and sprawling fields populated by poppies, the flower of the dead. Apart from the artistic analysis, Rupture makes the best use of valleyed areas with equal elevation provided to both sides and plenty of trenched cover. The distribution of the objectives allows for fairly even coverage of common routes, plus the central C objective being placed upon the distinctive viaduct adds a flair and flamboyance to the map. Overall, Rupture is my favourite of the French They Shall Not Pass maps. While Achibaba is broadly divided into 3 lanes, there is plenty of cover and adequate open areas for all classes to succeed. Typically, large-scale combat occurs around the C and D objectives, with the C flag typically being more closely quartered, while the D flag offers more cover and room to maneuver. If I had to critique the map, mortars can be particularly powerful when defending in operations, but this is true with any outdoor map with designated lanes, and isn't really an issue you can combat purely from a map design perspective. Passchendaele is perhaps the greatest depiction of the First World War in modern gaming history. The tone, colour palette, and dreary atmosphere perfectly illustrate the horror experienced by soldiers, all the while being framed by the terrors that inspired the Geneva Convention, gas and flame. From a balance perspective, Passchendaele is a different beast, and utilises its assets differently compared to its counterparts. Rather than traditionally dividing the map into designated zones and/or lanes, the cover is sporadically placed to mimic the destruction caused by frequent bombing. While this does leave many nooks and crannies to hide within, the sheer volume of cover forces you to rely more on game mechanics to anticipate where enemies are, rather than simply laying on a hill with a view of large swaths of land. The central objectives also complement this concept, with each being separated by little space compared to other maps, but instead by plenty of rubble, charred mounds, and trenches to keep the landscape engaging and manoeuvrable. Ballroom Blitz is almost universally accepted as a top-tier map by most within the BF1 community, due to its smart incorporation of all infantry, pilot, and tanker classes. While major clashes occur within the central courtyard, infantry can expect vicious battles within the ballroom and corresponding hallways. Snipers fight for control of the balconies, which provide sightlines across most major routes. Alternatively, the outer fountained areas offer more spaced out strategic combat, as players fight for what little cover is available. Finally, the pilot-server dynamic is about as good as it gets, with an ample amount of planes and anti-air equipment provided to both teams. Honestly, I really love Ballroom Blitz, and it may be the most balanced map in regards to all classes' viability. However, there is one map I am more partial to. Often forgotten, rarely mentioned, and even more rarely played, in my opinion, the best and most underrated map in Battlefield 1 is Brusilov Keep. In terms of conquest, rounds are fought for 4 flags, 2 of which align along the river at the centre of the map. Each side of this river is lined with plentiful cover within the townhouses, ruined church, and scalable rock surfaces. My favourite aspect of this is the utilisation of destruction across the entirety of the town and church, as cover can be strategically destroyed to both remove camping enemies and to create new lines of sight. I'm also partial to the map on operations, as the aggressing Russian Empire pushes the Austro-Hungarian Empire back through hilled cover, the township, and finally across more open land divided by train tracks. Overall, the limited tanker options, dual cavalry, and numerous cover types allows for the most enjoyable infantry experience in Battlefield 1. In my opinion, of course. Cheers for making it to the end of the video, guys. As always, if you liked the video and want to see more content like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button with your post notifications turned on. We recently hit 3,000 subscribers, which is really weird to think about. It feels like only yesterday I was uploading to only 100 people, but the goal is to try and hit 5,000 by the end of this year. Anyways, I've taken up enough of your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.